My boyfriend James, 29, wanted to go on vacation this summer to his mom's friend's house on the Oregon coast with me and his two best friends. His best guy friend is 25 and his best female friend also 29. We planned this trip all spring, and at some point the guy friend backed out, leaving just the three of us. For context, James and I have been together for 9 months. We've talked and still talk about moving in together, and we both say our relationship is long term and serious. In early June, when the guy friend suddenly dropped out, James's female friend Claire called him and said that now that it's just the three of us, she's uncomfortable with me coming along because she barely knows me and doesn't want to be the third wheel. She declared that if I go, she won't. She and James didn't tell me anything, changed the plans, and arranged a trip just for the two of them, switching the destination to Costa Rica. I was trying to figure out which dates to take off work this summer. I hadn't heard any updates about the trip, so I asked James which week in August I should plan for the Oregon coast. He told me he'd talked to Claire, and since she didn't want to go if I was going, they'd go to Costa Rica together instead. He said maybe we go to Mexico City later. I was upset and tried to talk to him about how I felt. In the end, we agreed to go to Copenhagen, a place we both always wanted to visit, as a sort of compensation. I also asked to meet Claire so I'd feel more at ease about their joint trip. On July 4th, we went to visit her and her boyfriend in a nearby city. And while it was nice to meet her in person overall, it was a very cold visit. This girl was completely unwelcoming to me. James himself noted that she acted unfriendly in his opinion toward both of us. I tried to connect with her and her boyfriend. I'm very outgoing and friendly, and usually that's not an issue. But I got nowhere even over a few days. They were also pretty cold with each other, arguing a bit about their future and his 3-week trip without her planned for the same dates as her and James's trip. I made an effort to befriend her to feel better about their vacation, but after the visit, I told James I was still uncomfortable and felt insulted by how it was all arranged. I tried to build a relationship between all of us and asked him to come up with something to help me feel better about this. Our trip. When we were visiting his family, they asked about the vacation and were shocked at how he'd rearranged everything. They said if they were in my shoes, they'd be furious. That led to an argument during which I again asked him to find some solution so I could feel calmer and more confident about him going with her without me. He said he'd never do anything like this again, but it sounded kind of unconvincing. He sort of offered not to go, but the tickets and bookings were already paid for, and I didn't want to ruin their trip and get resentment from him and Claire in return. He asked me to come up with something that could comfort me and told me to just tell him what to do. And he dragged and dragged until the day of the trip came. He bought me a pack of candies and I drove the two of them to the airport. I feel devalued and crushed in this situation. I want to break up with him, but I don't want to destroy what was otherwise really good in our relationship. Well, before we move to the update, I suggest pausing the video right now and writing your opinion on the situation in the comments. Personally, I think this is some kind of trash. I mean, it's one thing if he didn't take his partner on a trip they hadn't planned together, but another when they planned it and at the last minute everything got flipped. And in such a dumb way, with this friend saying she wouldn't go because of his girlfriend, especially not even knowing her. That's such a weird excuse. We're not acquainted. Well, get acquainted then, especially since they did meet and they still went off together. Now let's move to the update. Update after 9 days. The day I drove James to the airport, I was terribly upset. He texted me, but I didn't reply. I didn't know what I wanted, but I definitely didn't want to do anything in that state. The next day, I thought it over and sent him a message saying I didn't feel safe or loved with how the trip was handled, and that I'd leave his stuff at his place and give the keys to a neighbor. He called, but I didn't pick up, and then he wrote that he didn't understand what was happening. The rest of the week, he called and texted me, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. On Thursday, I think he realized I was serious and started asking logistical questions. I told him which neighbor had his key and such. When he got back and saw all his stuff at his place, he started panicking, calling, and left me a long voicemail. I was at work all day, and even after work, I still didn't want to answer. He asked me to explain because he didn't get what was going on. The next day, I sent another message clearly stating that we were done. He got mad and sent me a bunch of texts in a row, saying he didn't understand why I was throwing away everything we built. He left a voicemail angrily saying he didn't get why I was mad, and that he didn't accept the breakup because I hadn't given him a say, and he wanted me to tell him the reasons for my decision in person. I wasn't going to reply and tried to stay calm, but it got to me, so I sat down and wrote him a letter. I tried calling him first, but I broke down crying and said I'd just send the letter to his email. Here's what I wrote. The time we spent apart gave me space and a chance to think. I've reflected on what's important to me in a relationship, and I realize we shouldn't be together. Sorry for asking you to change things in your life that you shouldn't have to change for me or anyone else. From the start, this trip was arranged in an incredibly disrespectful way. Your friend, who I wasn't even acquainted with, gave you an ultimatum: either she goes or I do. And you chose her. You didn't suggest she meet me, even though theoretically I'm your long-term partner. That would have made sense. You didn't try to persuade her, bring someone else along, and you didn't consult me at all. For most people, that alone would be enough to end things. But I stayed. You have a history with this friend that isn't fully clear to me. There were bad rumors about you two that you spent a whole night together. When you were dating another girl, though supposedly nothing happened. I also learned you were once in love with her, at least theoretically. Then she started dating her current boyfriend, and that door closed for you. From what I understand, it took her boyfriend a long time to feel comfortable with you two being friends. And it seems you made efforts to get him to relax after who knows how long. And now this woman, a complete stranger to me, unilaterally excluded me from the trip. You didn't even tell me it happened until I asked when the Oregon Coast trip was happening. You were buying tickets for you two while I was cooking dinner. We had guests, and you went to my room for over an hour to pick flights for you both. I asked you several times to come back to the table, and you kept saying just a couple more minutes. There was absolutely no reason to do it right then, in that setting. Your friend lives in the same time zone as us and works 9 to 5. She could have done it herself. It made my stomach churn all evening. To feel even slightly better, I said I wanted to meet her. At my request, we arranged a short trip to see her and her boyfriend. And on that trip, as you later agreed, they were inexplicably cold. Our very first conversation was about how she messaged him privately when he was still in another relationship and got him to start dating her. You told me about her recent talks with you, which made it clear their relationship lacked stability. I told you that worried me, and despite all this, I still wanted things to work out for you, for me, for her. At that point, I was planning to be with you seriously and long term, and saw no benefit in forbidding you from vacationing with your best friend. I wanted it to work, but every detail, every little thing tied to this trip kept planting more and more doubts in me. Your dad, mom, grandma, and grandpa were stunned when we told them about this trip. It was obvious this was a risky move given how fragile our relationship was. We'd only been together 9 months then. How long did it take your friend's boyfriend to feel comfortable around you? We talked about this at the climbing gym in the car while booking an Airbnb in Copenhagen, when I said again that I was uncomfortable and felt bad about this whole mess. Though I asked you to help me, you ended up asking me to come up with what could comfort me, and I couldn't think of anything either. In the end, it turned out the original plan to meet at my place, hang out, and have a board game night before your trip was canceled, and your friend was supposed to sleep at my place but not spend time with us. You explained it by saying you didn't discuss it with her in time, and apparently the issue wasn't even raised until 2 days before the trip. That upset me. You didn't know what to do. I don't blame you. By that point, it was all out of control. I didn't know what to do either. The only solution I could think of was to wait out the trip. I told you I had two options, either get through this or break up with you. And I don't want to break up, but I have less and less and less strength to deal with this. She came to my place very late, and the next morning I drove you both to the airport. After everything I know, you saw how unhappy I was. I absolutely know you saw it. You left, and when I didn't reply to your message, you wrote that you hoped I was okay, and went to bed. Not a single call. The rest of the week was awful. To my message, you basically replied, "I'm sorry you feel that way." You said, "I was being unfair." No acknowledgement, and there still isn't that a trip to a place perfect for a honeymoon, which, by the way, we talked about before, is actually a crazy and terrible idea. Even with my formal go-ahead to do as you please, people in relationships shouldn't go through this. People in relationships don't act like this. Well, except your friend, apparently. In the end, it all boils down to my emotional needs being unmet to such a degree that this became a point of no return for me. We had wonderful, really good moments, but there was also a completely unnecessary amount of heartache and suffering. I can't accept your relationship with your friend. I probably could have made you choose her or me, but I don't want that. I want you to keep your best friend, and I want to leave. I really loved you, but I'm not going to fight this battle and spend the rest of my life hearing you call me crazy for not seeing how purely platonic you two are. It's like convincing someone to love different food or change their favorite color. I don't feel good in this relationship, and I don't want to feel these feelings anymore. It doesn't need mutual consent. I don't need your permission to break up with you. He wrote me an apologetic letter in which he took responsibility for almost everything without argument except for one thing. He refused to admit that his relationship with her could have made me uncomfortable and disagreed that I couldn't handle their bond. He said the only thing that ruined our relationship was my own perspective on things. I replied that trust needs to be built, and he put too much strain on our relationship too early, when that trust wasn't there yet. He agreed and apologized. For me, it ended pretty peacefully, but that relationship format just doesn't work for me. And I don't feel his responses really changed anything. I'm sticking to my decision. Well, before we move to the next story, I'd like to say I completely agree with the author. A very sober, healthy view of relationships. If that format doesn't suit you, you just walk away from the relationship. Especially since they hadn't been together long, they're not married, no kids. Of course, you just split, and that's it. So there are no more problems down the road. Second story, caught my wife cheating with our friend during a joint beach trip. Thanks to a prenup, I left her with nothing. I'm 40, my wife is 32. We just moved to a new neighborhood near Seattle and didn't know anyone there. Luckily, through our kids' friends, we met a few cool couples we could hang out with. One of those couples, let's call them Larry and Pam, really clicked with us. We had a lot of shared interests, and they lived, you could say, a glamorous lifestyle, always traveling. Despite having kids before meeting them, my wife and I didn't even think that was possible. We quickly became close and started seeing each other often. It helped that our kids bonded too. Everything was going great. Whenever we wanted a double date or a trip somewhere, we could always call them. We could talk about kids or just chat. After a couple of months, I started noticing Larry was getting a bit too bold. Once he flirted with my wife, and I jokingly told him to cool it, she's taken. Pam shrugged and said, "He's just like that, loves to flirt, and it's nothing serious." I was confident in my relationship and didn't make a big deal of light flirting. Always thought it was pretty harmless as long as no lines were crossed. But the flirting kept happening often enough to make me a little uneasy. My wife is a total beauty. I don't mean to say Pam isn't attractive, but Larry would have to be blind not to want my wife. I just wasn't so sure anymore if he respected our boundaries. Every summer, Pam and Larry sent their kids to a summer camp. And this time, they convinced us to send ours to the same one. The idea was that while the kids were at camp for 2 weeks, the adults could go on a kid-free vacation. Honestly, it sounded awesome. My wife and I were thrilled for this trip. It was a perfect chance to spend time together, like a second honeymoon. In the weeks leading up to it, my wife got a bit distant. I chalked it up to her feeling uneasy about being away from the kids. 2 weeks apart was longer than we'd ever been, but I noticed she started secretly calling and texting someone hiding the screen. I got curious about what was going on. The trip day came, and we joined Pam and Larry at a rented beach house on the Washington coast. We split the cost of the place. The house was right by the beach with a hot tub on the deck, a big grill, and overall it was a luxe premium spot, a paradise. The first night we bought beer and wine. I was grilling meat, got a bit tipsy. We were all on the deck. I noticed my wife and Larry flirting again. I was in a great mood, so I just laughed it off again. I went to bed, and the next morning waking up, I saw my wife wasn't beside me. When I got up and walked around the house, I saw her on the shore in a swimsuit gone for a swim. No big deal, except Larry was with her. He was standing nearby, shirtless in swim trunks, way too close to her, clearly checking her out in her swimsuit, and she wasn't doing anything to divert his gaze. I went out to them right away. They both greeted me like everything was fine, and that calmed me a bit. But I still didn't like Larry ogling my wife, so I practically dragged him back to the house. Later that same night, we all went dancing together. More drinks. We were having fun on the dance floor, a bit drunk. I noticed Larry constantly reaching for my wife. At this point, I wasn't laughing anymore. He was always near her, and it was really grating. What pissed me off even more was that she let him. He'd come up and put his hands on her waist, and she'd lean into him. Did she think it was me, or was she that drunk I waited till morning to talk to her about it? She just brushed it off, saying I had nothing to worry about. Apparently, she didn't even remember dancing with Larry. On the third final day of our trip, it all fell apart. We'd planned to stay 6 days originally, but I had to leave early because I caught Larry with my wife. The day before had been calm, except I caught Larry's eyes on my wife in her bikini a couple times. I believed what my wife said and decided not to stress. But as often happens, the moment you relax, you realize you were right all along. We were set to grill something. I was in the backyard cooking. Pam was with me skewering chicken and veggies. I didn't even notice my wife and Larry had slipped off somewhere. I ran into the house to grab more meat from the fridge and heard rustling from the laundry room. I stopped and listened. It was obvious two people were in there trying to hook up as quietly as possible. I flung the door open and saw my wife and Larry in the thick of it. They were so caught up they barely noticed me come in. A few seconds later, Pam walked in. She'd come for veggies and saw the scene too. She screamed at Larry and he jerked back, knocking my wife to the floor. Both were shocked. They didn't expect us to catch them at all. I just turned and went to pack my stuff. My wife ran after me to the room, begging me not to leave, to forgive her, saying he meant nothing to her. He was just there at the right moment. I had absolutely nothing to say to that. The laundry room was the right moment. It made no sense. I told her to get away from me, and she did. I noticed her phone on the nightstand charging. I scrolled through her texts just to see how long this had been going on. Apparently it had been weeks. Turns out she and Larry were texting about how they couldn't wait for the beach trip. Larry wrote he was most excited to see her in a swimsuit. At first, my wife replied it was inappropriate, but he kept at it, and eventually she admitted. She liked him too, and wouldn't mind a little intrigue in her life. They'd hooked up once before the trip at our house in the kitchen. I found Pam and told her everything I learned from my wife's phone. She was as hurt as I was. We left that beach together and went home. The whole drive back, we talked about how angry we were and how we wanted to ruin their lives. When I got married, my mom insisted we sign a prenup. I wasn't the richest guy in the world, but I'd inherited some money before meeting my wife and had saved up a decent amount. I had a good job, steady salary, and great benefits. It was enough for my wife not to work. Our prenup clearly stated that in case of divorce, she'd get part of my assets, except if the divorce was due to her infidelity or breaking marital vows. Since she cheated, I could walk away without losing a cent. That was the best thing I could think of to hit her where it really hurt. She didn't come home until the next day, and I started wondering if she used it as a chance to stay longer with Larry. I told her we were divorcing and that I wanted her out of the house. She said I couldn't do that to her, that she had rights and that in a divorce she'd get half of everything. It was like she'd wanted this all along. I started doubting if she ever loved me at all. I reminded her about the prenup. I saw the indignation in her eyes turn to realization that she was in deep trouble. Pam and I both filed for divorce. I didn't have to pay my wife a dime, and I sold the house in the end. Now I'm just trying to piece my life back together. I know good people are still out there. I just need to find them. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching this video to the end. Also, check out our previous videos, which you'll see right here. And good luck to you.